Hey, what's up YouTube? So I'm building this little landing here, replacing these brick stairs. Basically what I'm doing, since I'm working by myself, I'm just leveling things out. Pulled off the threshold and allowed an inch and 1/8 drop for 1/4 inch decking. I'm not going to slope this at all since this is a nice big covered deck. So the boards will be gapped though to deal with any water that gets on the deck. So then I leveled out. I got my 2 beams close. This is going to be a flush beam deck due to grade issues obviously we're dealing with. So now I'm just going to tack up my 2 end joists and square it, and then I'm going to set my footings and kind of just square the deck and get it all in place. So I'm cutting my deck joist at 45 inches. On this deck, this is Western Red Cedar. My local Menards only carries grade 3. So looking at span charts, they recommend 12-inch centers for the 5/4 grade 3. And always crown your joist up, obviously. And I'm toe screwing. This is how I set all my joists to height. And then I'll come back and put on hangers. So there, I got it at least tacked up. Now I'm going to do the 3-4-5 method, square it up, and the main area will be right in the front along these columns. I need an inch each way. So there, it's finally square. How to go about this. So the 3-4-5, to square it up, you pull off this corner. That's your outside edge you're pulling off. Mark the outside edge. So I mark 3 foot. And I pull again down 4 foot, and I'm in this corner. And then what you do is you put the edge of your tape on your 4 foot down there. You lay out the very edge, and I'm right on the money. And it's as simple as that. You can use greater measurements in those same 3-4-5 increments for a bigger area. So another method you can use is you can pull diagonals to make sure you're square. So like here, my issues are concerned with these columns. I need an inch each way on the side of my joist for my fascia. Then you hook the very outside corner, pull outside corner to outside corner. I got 129.5, and then you pull it the other way. Hook on that outside corner, and you want to pull your tape pretty tight. 129.5. So right now this is perfectly squared up. Obviously if you're long or short, you gotta shift. Like for me, I gotta shift the back because I'm dealing with the front's kind of got to be where it's got to be. So now I'm perfectly square. So there's 2 ways, the 3-4-5 or just pulling diagonals. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I'm level. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to set my final elevation with my 6x6 post. It can be kind of hard pulling the tape and getting it level. This was my rough height. So what I did is take a shim, put it in the back, get it dead level, and then I'll scribe that, set my 6x6 scribe where it's going to bear, and then subtract the thickness of my shim. If your deck is exposed, you might want to do an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch slope per foot to ensure good drainage. I have good cover here, so I'm not worried about that. And if your deck boards are spaced by code, you do not have to slope it. At 16 inches, I'm going to cut my 6x6 post, set this one, and then set the next one there. And what determined my elevation was I measure off the bottom of the threshold 1 inch and 1/8. My decking is 1 inch thick, so I wanted just a slight bit of gap so water could get out. And I scribed it on the side. So right now the back beam is set to elevation, and then I'm leveling to my front here, if that makes sense. For your beam cantilever, your beam can cantilever 1/4 inch of its total span. So my beam is 10 foot, so I could do it up to a 2.5 foot cantilever, which I'm roughly doing 12 inches, where it works out with my joist. So in my post and beam connection, I'm using 6-inch headlock screws. I really like these. I'm doing 2 per post. Kind of doing a diagonal pattern. And then in the post space, I'm using M-Tech. It's a structural wood screw, and there's a larger hole in these bases. And these right angle drill bits or extensions come in super handy for something like this. I wish I would have bought this a long time ago. I just keep it on me for, you know, hard to reach fasteners. Very handy. Saved my butt multiple times. So, and then I'm also using these Simpson structural screws, fill in the other holes. There, I'll kind of show you my setup of my post and beam connection. You can see I'm using that bigger M-Tech. It's like a 1/4 inch in the center. Simpson post bases. I'm filling every hole there. I decided to notch 1 for 1, so 1.5 inch notch, just so I had more meat to bite into. You can also add a splice block, which I might do on the front. Just 1.5 inch 2x6, you know, where you put it in right here. I think they call that a splice block, but essentially just have full bearing. You know, the old school way of bolting your post and beam connections, just bolting it to the face of your post, isn't very good. Obviously, the more bearing you have, the better. So I'll probably add splice blocks on the front. right there. But yeah, so at least it's level, it's set. Like I said, this is a flush beam deck just because of the clearance of the old landing. I still need to tack on a 2x6 in there under the threshold. One thing people might think is, why don't you just use a masonry anchor and go through the brick? These old homes, they can have an inch of airspace. You can see the insulation down there. So that brick is only held up with these ties to the house. So if you would load an anchor and try to bolt to that brick, it's not meant to be loaded. It's only meant to be loaded with the weight above it. So you can't do that. I've seen they do make special anchors now that claim you can do that, but I don't know. I haven't read much into those, so it's hard to say. But anyways, I got one more to set. Hey, what's up, YouTube? So on this deck with a brick facade, you can't directly attach your ledger board to the brick. So what I did was remove the course of brick under the threshold, attached a 2x6 to the rim board or the band joist of the house, ripped a 4x4 to fit in between where my beam's gonna sit, attach that to my this beam. Essentially it's a ledger, and what I'm gonna do, since I removed all the brick under that threshold, I'm running a 3/8 by 10-inch lag into the rim joist that is exposed under the door threshold. I've seen that Simpson does make a specialty fastener now that you can drill through the brick. You drill it at an angle, and then there's some big legs that go through and some special plates. This is a small deck, but I'm just tying these in to prevent any racking. So I'm gonna run some of these through, and that's gonna stiffen it up. Once again, my decking is gonna be 5/4 Western red cedar. It's number 3. So I went with 12-inch centers on my joist, which is recommended. So tying these in should really stiffen it up. That way I don't have to worry about any sway bracing because it's so low to the ground. Another consideration when you're doing low clearance stuff on this deck is that's why I did a flush beam. Our flush beams versus a post and beam connection. You can see I got my post notched. I'm starting to get my hardware on. I just wanted to get these legs in while I had ample room. So yeah, I'm pre-drilling 4x4. That 4x4, I don't want it to split. And this is one of those new Milwaukee brushless impacts, and it's got plenty of power to drive these legs. This thing's been awesome. A lot of times I turn it down because it'll snap screws pretty easy. And I'm not sucking it in super tight because everything's square and sitting right where it needs to be. My post bases are set. So essentially once you lock that in, that'll help it from racking. So it's not like I'm trying to really suck these fasteners down. So I'm putting on hangers. I always buy the style that has the tabs you can drive in. I'm using a combination of nails and screws, structural screws. How I always do a deck is I always hang my joist by toe screwing. That way it sets the height of my joist right on. Then I'll come back with hangers. I find that easier because the variance in Green Street lumber is great enough. So I'm using the screws to set the hanger tight. I don't think they hold as well as 16V galvanized. Obviously the shear strength, but I'll just set the top one with the screw. Or if you can't get in there with a hammer, having these M-Tech screws or Simpson make structural screws. Sometimes you really can't get a hammer in places. So I set the top, and then I'm using 3.5/16. I always work left to right. Obviously you can see right there why. Trying to drive a nail and you can't really swing your hammer. And with green treat lumber, always check the ends, because usually a lot of times they won't be square, the factory. And always crown up, and always mark them, especially if you're working with someone else. And versus trying to toe screw like that, a good trick is you could set your screw in between your beam like this and start it and then run it through. And I'll sometimes set one to keep the joist plumb, toe screw on the bottom. And I'm working pretty tight here on 12-inch centers because I got grade 3 cedar. So, and when you're toe screwing, make sure and hold your joist a little high. That way, when you suck it down and get it tight, it'll be level or flush with your beam. So I set one side and then wrap the joist hanger around and set the other.